Welcome to the Trent England Show, our lunchtime edition this Friday, because I had a radio interview this morning, so we're doing it at lunchtime. Let me know if this time works better for you. We're always, as we get into the new format of the show, we're always curious to get your feedback on what works better for you. This is obviously our Union Demands edition of the program. The Oklahoma Education Association held a press conference yesterday. I watched the whole thing and live tweeted a lot of it. If you follow me on Twitter at Trent England, you saw all of that melee yesterday. It was demands. Okay, let's get the basics here. There had been news this week that the Oklahoma Education Association, which is a teacher union, I still have people sometimes, well, I haven't had it happen in the last couple of weeks, but people say, well, we don't have teacher unions in Oklahoma, because in a lot of rural districts, that's absolutely true. A lot of rural districts, there are no teachers unions. Even in big urban districts where there are unions, there are union contracts, a lot of teachers choose not to participate. And because Oklahoma is a right-to-work state, that means they can't be fired. They can't be forced to participate. So the Oklahoma Education Association represents a minority of Oklahoma teachers. I mean, it's portrayed in the press as if the OEA is this 10,000-pound gorilla that represents all the teachers in Oklahoma. It's just factually inaccurate. But it had been reported that OEA was going to come out with their own proposal on Thursday afternoon. And so a lot of people expected that OEA was going to roll out a revenue package, some kind of particular proposal. This is how teacher pay should be. This is how teacher pay should be raised, and this is how it should be done. Right? You've got spending, you've got revenue. They didn't do that, and I think this is, in a way, this is to their credit. They learned from the step-up tax increase, folks, right? The step-up effort wound up with this micromanaging. It was almost as if they wanted to plan out the entire legislative session in advance. You have to pass these tax increases. You have to pass these reforms. It has to all happen our way, and it all fell apart. And part of the reason why it fell apart was it was very specific, it was very brittle, it was micromanaging the legislature, it was disrespectful to a lot of members of the legislature. And again, to the OEA's credit, they seem to have learned from that mistake. They said, we're not going to tell you how to raise the money. We're not going to tell you what taxes to raise. There have already been conversations about tax increases. Let the legislature figure it out. And I mean, I'll say it for a third time. I think that was totally to their credit. I think it was smart politics. I think it's good policy in the sense that, look, leave that up to the legislature. But what the OEA did that was even more surprising than that, and is not to their credit at all, and is already generating blowback from teachers, was say, we don't just want a $5,000 pay raise, we want a $10,000 pay raise, and we want a $5,000 pay raise for other school employees, and we want more money just put into the general education budget, and we want more money for, well, I don't know, health care. And I know that's in there. They put health care spending, more money into Oklahoma health care bureaucracies, basically bailouts for Oklahoma Health Care Authority, Oklahoma State Department of Health, right? That made it in there, and a $5,000 pay raise for other state employees, right? They packed this thing. It's like a Christmas tree now, right? It's got goodies hung on it for everybody out there. It's amazing, and as I say, already generating, I already was hearing this morning, blowback from teachers saying, wait a second, right? Why is this effort that's supposed to be about teacher pay raises all of a sudden it has all of these other pieces attached? And frankly, some people saying, look, I mean, a $5,000 pay raise, that's a pretty good step, right? That's a pretty good pay raise. And when it's already been hard to figure out how to do a $5,000 pay raise, it seems like the Oklahoma Education Association union's $10,000 teacher pay raise, I mean, just that starting gambit, right, and let alone all of the other things they hung on this Christmas tree, makes it seem something less than serious, except that they are threatening to shut down as many schools as they can. It's still unclear. Oklahoma City and Tulsa districts have said that they're going to shut down. There are some other districts that have said they're going to shut down. It's still unclear how many of Oklahoma's 520 school districts actually will shut down. I've heard from some folks in rural parts of the state who say our schools aren't going to shut down, or at least say, I certainly hope our schools won't shut down. I've heard from some teachers who say, I have no intention of walking out. But that's where all that stands today. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the politics of it in a couple of minutes, because I want to tell you where this is likely to go next. And at the end of the show, I'm going to give legislators a way out of this. Because actually, ironically maybe, the Constitution, the Oklahoma Constitution, has a roadmap for the legislature to deal with this situation in particular. But first of all, I wanted to start off, and this actually, you might see where I'm going with this. The Oklahoma Today is packed with education stories, and it's just, it's a reminder, you know, if you're in the Oklahoma City metro area like I am, you've got this laying around. It's a reminder of how complex the issues are that go on inside our schools. Of course, we have teacher union demands at the top, and then under that it says Back to the Future. It's about the auto show, but it should have been, can we pull up the picture of the teacher strikes from 1990? Right? I mean, people with historical perspective know that one of the interesting things about all of this is that it happened a generation ago. It happened in 1990. I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But okay, so we've got the teacher union demands on the front page. But you get into this, we've got Bixby down here in the corner. We've got the Bixby rape case, the disgraced superintendent there. And don't forget, in Bixby, the superintendent was allowed to stay. They covered up the first rape allegation there. When the second rape allegation happened at the superintendent's house, involving the superintendent's son, right? I mean, this was a school activity at the superintendent's house. The school district allowed him to stay, covered it up until he qualified for his full pension. You get to pay that. They paid him bonuses, and they paid him a settlement to quit. They paid him to quit. The disgraced superintendent of Bixby Public Schools. That makes the paper. We've also got Perry. In here, we have the Perry principal. She's not going to do any prison time. She's going to get a slap on the wrist, get some probation over the fact that she declined to actually take seriously and thereby allowed abuse to go on in her school in Perry. So that makes the paper today. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have new allegations. A Carl Albert High School band teacher arrested on Thursday for soliciting sex from what he thought was an underage girl. So good for police there to catch that. We have a gun at school. I mean, look, I've been accused by folks on the other side, by folks who want more government spending. You're always negative on public schools. You're always ragging on public schools. And I point out, look, that's not at all the fact. Public schools do a lot of great things. I went to public schools for 13 years, right? We know there are a lot of hardworking teachers out there. We know there are a lot of teachers who are, I mean, just some of the best, most salt-of-the-earth people in our communities doing hard work in public schools every single day. But the point is, there's more wrong in education in Oklahoma than just dollars and cents. And the people who want to only talk about money, the people at the Oklahoma Education Association, the people down the street from here at the Oklahoma City Public Schools, the people at the Turnpike at Tulsa Public Schools, they only want to talk about the money because that's the only way they can distract people from the fact that they socially promote people who can't read, they misdiagnose students as having learning disabilities because they get more money for it and it's easier than actually educating them. And we know there are problems, there are educational problems, there are problems with classroom management and safety in some of our public schools, so they would rather talk about the money. I'm not going to let them get away with it. I hope you don't let them get away with it, right? What we should be doing is talking about students. What's best for students? Giving teachers a raise, would that be a good thing? Increasing the competitiveness for teaching jobs, right? You pay more, you get more applicants, you get more people who want to do it. That's a good thing. I mean, it could be a good thing, could help kids, could not help kids too. I mean, if the people hiring teachers, if it's all controlled by unions and seniority and all of that, right, then paying teachers more probably doesn't help kids at all. Maybe, maybe gradually, maybe over a generation of turnover if you have more applicants, right? But look, I mean, let's be real about this, right? Taking everybody who works in public schools right now and giving them $5,000 or $10,000 extra dollars, how many kids does it help? Nobody. Helps no kids right now, right? I mean, maybe, again, over time, if you have less turnover, I suppose that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing, right? I mean, there are ways where this could help kids slowly over time, but dumping money on people right now does not make them better at their jobs if they're having a problem doing their job right now. So, okay, this is just being real about all this. Okay, so the Oklahoma Education Association, I told you, we'll get to the politics of this and where it's going in just a minute, but I want to break down some of their proposal. Let's pull up our chart here of what they're actually proposing. And this is, I had to recreate this chart because the Oklahoma Education Association, they rolled out a chart yesterday, but they didn't put the real totals on it. They actually, if you go and you find their chart leaves off the real totals. So what are they asking for? I mean, this is, again, it's a lot of money. You can see they're asking for, in the next budget year, that's fiscal year 19, they're asking for a $366 million teacher pay raise. That equates to $6,000 a year for teachers. And then the next year, they're asking for another $2,000 pay raise. And then the year after that, another $2,000 pay raise. So over 3 years, you got 6, 2, 2, you got $10,000 per teacher pay raises. What does that cost? All right, now that would cost, over those 3 years, that would cost $1.4 billion. That's the 3-year cost. The 3-year cost of what the Oklahoma Education Association is promoting. They're also asking for what would be, over the course of 3 years, a $2,500 increase in teacher pay. Excuse me, a $5,000 increase in teacher pay over 3 years. That adds up to almost $300 million over 3 years in additional spending. And then they have the other increases in spending. That's just money into the education bureaucracy. They want what would be, over 3 years, about $500 million additional funding into the education bureaucracy, for a grand total 3-year cost of $2.1 billion for all of that. And then you throw in there state employee pay increases and healthcare spending increases, and you have a cost of, over 3 years, $3.3 billion. Or if you look at the year 3 total there, 1.4, within 3 years, this would be a $1.4 billion budget increase in a state where the appropriated budget is about $7 billion. So you're going to go from $7 billion to $8.4 billion just with this proposal. It's more than a 10% increase in state spending. This is a huge increase in spending, a huge increase in taxes, assuming that if it happened, it would be a huge increase in taxes. It would have to be. That's what the Oklahoma Education Association rolled out yesterday. Okay, so what are the politics of this? You've got a couple different responses to this, and I want us to be real about this. I'm a conservative. A lot of our viewers are conservatives. People are also all over the map, right? A lot of people looked at this and said, this is nuts, and therefore this is not serious, right? And I want to back us off that just a little bit. That was my initial reaction. Let's think about how this actually came together, right? I mean, what is it that produced a plan with a price tag that is almost $1.5 billion in increased spending, when the legislature has been struggling to figure out how to raise taxes by $500 or $600 million, right? I mean, this seems a little crazy, but what happened here is, right, they're talking about shutting down schools. And I'm sure what happened behind the scenes is you got people saying, let's not waste this opportunity. Let's go big, right? Let's get what we really want, rather than settling for anything less. And I'm sure they went to some of these other groups that are out there. I mean, look, the chambers of commerce these days have a lot of big hospital corporations in them. So if you want chamber support, usually what you do is you throw in some money for hospital corporations through the healthcare agencies in there. And the state employees, right? You have a lot of state employees who are not teachers. You throw a raise in there for them to try to get support from more groups of people who are generally in favor of tax increases, but they want their cut, right? They want their share of the tax hikes, right? So they went out and they bought some support from some other special interest groups out there. And once you do that, the number just winds up being pretty big. But folks on the left are not saying this is crazy. Folks on the left are saying this is bold. This is visionary. I want us to understand that, right? From the perspective of people who want bigger government, this is bold, visionary leadership, right? I mean, they're not just asking for a $500 million tax increase. They're asking for billions and billions of dollars, right? That's what people on the left want. The big question is, what are people in the middle going to do? And we've talked about this on the program, and I've talked about how when you actually have a teacher strike, the whole optics of it change. And I think I shared yesterday, I'm already hearing from legislators that they're hearing backlash themselves to the idea of a teacher pay raise, which leaves a lot of legislators saying, well, I'm not sure how this is going to go. I'm not sure whether the public pressure is going to wind up on the legislature or on the OEA and some of these school districts that are going to shut down. Where is this headed? It is almost unthinkable. It is unthinkable that the legislature is going to vote on a tax increase that would increase taxes over $1 billion, right? And I said within 3 years this would cost $1.4 billion. Now the first year cost of this is $812 million, and if you took all of the tax increase proposals that the legislature has bandied about, has thought about, you could get up to that number, but you can't get the votes to do it if you want to do it without a vote of the people. But wait a second, I mentioned a minute ago this whole Back to the Future headline in the paper, which ought to be about the fact that all this happened back in the early 1990s. What exactly happened in the early 1990s in Oklahoma? There were demands for increased teacher pay. There were demands for increased spending on education. The promise was made, if we spend more money on education, we'll have better schools and more student learning. And so legislation was passed, increasing spending, increasing taxes. A major tax increase was passed, and actually there were a series of tax increases that were passed in the late 80s and early 90s. And the voter blowback was so intense that what happened? What happened was Oklahomans went to the polls and amended the state constitution. And what is that called? You probably know, right? State Question 640. State Question 640 was the response to legislators caving in to a teacher walkout and demands for a major tax increase. And by the way, Oklahoma has seen these fluctuations in education spending, big bumps up, and then, and then oil prices go down and you see a trough and then you get another big bump up. Education spending has fluctuated all over the place in Oklahoma. Anybody serious about student learning can look at how much are we spending, how much are students learning, how much are we spending, what are the results we're getting in the classroom, and see the amount of money that you spend almost never has anything to do with what happens in the classroom, which tells me, as somebody who's serious about student learning and serious about excellence in our schools, that the question is almost entirely about things other than money. More money can be good. Even the research on the left shows this. More money can be good, more money can be helpful, but more money can also be 100% wasted or even be spent in ways that are counterproductive. Where is this going to go? Well, State Question 640 actually gives legislators a way out, and we've been saying this on the program I've been saying this for years. What does State Question 640 say? What did voters say in the early 1990s in response to a legislature that caved in to a teacher walkout? The people of Oklahoma said, if you want to raise our taxes, you give us a voice. If you want to raise our taxes, put it on the ballot. And that's why Oklahoma has, despite the fact that the Oklahoman can't get this right, but you don't need them, you've got us. The Oklahoma Constitution says simple majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate, simple majority of a vote of the people, right? Unless, and then it says there's an exception, that's Section C, and then in Section D says, well, here's the exception. The exception is if you get a supermajority in the House and a supermajority in the Senate, then you don't have to send it to a vote of the people. But the primary method of raising taxes in Oklahoma, because of a teacher walkout and a massive tax increase, is send it to a vote of the people. The people have spoken. The people have told the legislature what to do. If the legislature is going to try to put some kind of a revenue package together to meet the demands of the Oklahoma Education Association, the people have already said the process through which that should happen. The legislature can pass it. Simple majority in the House, simple majority in the Senate. We've already seen that there are plenty of Republicans willing to grow Oklahoma government, right? And everybody wants to give teachers a raise. They ought to do it by actually shifting money from lower priorities to higher priorities. They ought to do it by passing things like Medicaid audits, by breaking down funding silos. They're working on some of those things. We're going to talk about some of those things next week. There's some great efforts in the legislature in regard to some of those priorities. But to the extent that they're going to raise revenue, they do not need 3/4 supermajorities. They need to send it to a vote of the people. The people of Oklahoma have spoken after the last teacher walkout. Send revenue measures to us. Let us vote. Let us have a say. And now some people are going to say, well, wait a second, that would have to wait until November. It'd have to wait till the next general election. And that is true. But I think it'd be pretty hard for the Oklahoma Education Association if the legislature cobbles together something that says teachers get a raise if the voters adopt this measure. I think it would be profoundly unpopular and unsustainable for the Oklahoma Education Association to demand a strike and for some of these school districts to shut down and punish students and punish teachers just in response to the fact that the people are going to have a say, that the people are going to have a vote on whether to accept or not a revenue package. And frankly, if the legislature is serious about this, they shouldn't pass it as a package. This is the last thing I'll say about how all this ought to work out. They should pass it as a menu. I mean, give people choices, right? They can put, they can put 3 or 4 revenue measures on the ballot, give people choices, pass legislation now that says if any of these pass, here's where the money goes, right? This is not actually that complicated. It gets reported in the newspaper literally every day, I think, this week. One newspaper or another, mostly the Oklahoman, has said, well, the only way to raise taxes is with 3/4 supermajorities. It's not true. I mean, the whole story is intertwined with the last time our state went through exactly this same scenario. So there we go. I mean, that is the legislature's way out, right? Just do what the people have already told you to do. Put whatever it is on the ballot, let the people vote. And let the Oklahoma Education Association argue against the idea that the people of Oklahoma should have a say. I think that, their membership has been dwindling over time. I think you'll see them lose a lot more membership if that happens, right? So, okay, that is where we are with all of that. The last thing I want to say is about this idea, and I think we got a tweet that we can pull up, this idea that a teacher strike it's for the kids. It's not going to hurt kids. It's for the kids. The scheduling of this strike proves that is not exactly right. Because initially they were talking about striking on April 2nd, then they moved it back to April 23rd because that would have put it after a lot of the testing. And look, this is not just, I know a lot of people, it's popular to hate tests. I mean, who doesn't hate tests? I just, it's a juvenile thing that has sort of leached into our adult world. We all hate tests, fine. We all hate tests. But if you're a high school sophomore or junior or senior, and you have ACT testing or AP testing or IB testing coming up, right? I mean, that is your college admissions, right? That is your next step. That is the culmination or part of the culmination of this whole process. The teacher strike date was going to be pushed to April 23rd, and then the activists. And if you follow even what the OEA said, they admitted this. It was the hardcore activists that said, no, we want April 2nd because April 2nd will hurt more. And who does it hurt? It doesn't hurt the legislature anymore. I mean, if teachers go on strike, teachers are going to be on strike. That's going to be a big deal no matter what, right? But it hurts the students and families a lot more to do it on April 2nd than to do it on April 23rd. And so this whole idea that, it's an act of love. It hurts me more than it hurts you. I mean, this is the height of absurdity. Nobody should buy that. And look, I mean, I understand that some teachers view them getting more pay as good for their students. I mean, I don't. It just seems like there's a certain dishonesty in that. I think teachers should get more pay. I think Oklahoma should pay teachers better in our government-run schools. But the idea that it helps students is actually pretty silly, right? I mean, giving teachers more money to spend on school supplies, providing more money, breaking down these silly silos that we have over funding so that instead of Catoosa giving every student a MacBook, they can actually buy better textbooks, right? I think all that makes sense, and all that would obviously help kids. Putting more money in teachers' paychecks every month, the way in which that helps kids is so attenuated that the argument that all of this is really only about the students, come on. I mean, don't push us that far because there are some arguments that we can only make fun of. even here on the Trent England Show, where we try to take everything just as seriously as we can. State Question 640 provides the answer, the roadmap for legislators, for people who know the history of the state of Oklahoma and what happened in the early 1990s. State Question 640. That provides the answer. We're going to talk about it more next week. We're going to talk about legislation next week. I've got an interview. I didn't have time to play it today. I have an interview with an economist talking about tax policy. We're going to run that on Monday. You won't want to miss that. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe on iTunes or listen on SoundCloud or watch on YouTube or watch on Facebook. Glad to have you here with us. Thanks for watching the Trent England Show.